Hello, people of the internet. I am Andres Perez, aka Kaij Noir, and welcome to episode 31 of the Fully Endorsed podcast. I am, of course, your host for today's episode, and here with me is my one and only co-host, Dylan McCandless, aka Super DM64.
Hi, everybody. I was going to think of like a space joke, but I failed to do so in time.
Space joke! How's that?
There you go. That works, I guess.
So for today's episode, we are going to talk about Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds, the official game of the movie. So,
yes, of course.
So for this particular episode, I definitely want to give a huge shout out to a fan of mine, an acquaintance, goes by the name of S452, or as he also wanted to be credited as, David Patterson, YouTube name S452, Twitter name Gojisaurus. I guess he must have known that at some point I must have mentioned it online that I was a huge fan of The War of the Worlds, the H.G. Wells's classic novel from I believe 1898, or at least it was published in full in 1898. And since then, he is pretty much like my go-to guy for anything and everything War of the Worlds related. And he was the guy who pretty much led me down this like rabbit hole that is Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds. And it was something that always intrigued me for several years, ever since I first came across the musical version of War of the Worlds through Audible. I've never listened to the Audible version, but it was the thing that really piqued my interest, thinking like, really? There's a musical of one of my favorite, if not my all-time favorite novel? And so the more I learned about this project and its history, its tumultuous like ups and downs in terms of adaptations, it really got me wanting to share this with my other friends, and pretty much everyone had the same reaction of, there's a War of the Worlds musical? And so yeah, I'm really glad to...
What?
Yeah, what? No! And so yeah, I got... Well, you can certainly ask Jeff Wayne that. I'm pretty sure his answer would be, I want my version of The War of the Worlds to be the only version, which we'll get into eventually. So to start things off, as we tend to do on this show, what has been your exposure to War of the Worlds in general, Dylan? And what are your thoughts on the book and various adaptations as a whole?
I mean, pretty much everything but this, I guess. I mean, I'm like you, I'm a fan of the book. I haven't read it in a long time. I need to read it again. I'm an enormous fan of the George Powell film, 1956, 7, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I've seen the Steven Spielberg one. Not a huge fan of that one, really. But yeah, I enjoy this story. And I'm also a big fan of Independence Day, which is basically a remake.
Yeah.
Might as well be. Particularly of the 1953 film. I just looked it up. 1953. I was off by a few years, but yeah. Which, by the way, if anybody's listening to this and hasn't picked up the War of the Worlds Blu-ray from the Criterion Collection, I highly recommend it. But yeah. So I'm very familiar with this story and the source material, and all the other versions. I had no idea about this musical prior to your informing me of it, and so this came as something of a shock.
Yeah, and it's really surprising not a lot of people, even for me as well, that not a lot of people have heard of this musical, given that at one point, on several points over the last like 30-40 years, Jeff Wayne had attempted to make this version of War of the Worlds the only version that anyone could ever adapt from, which is a pretty shitty move if you ask me. So I get that the guy had like a very interesting vision for this series. He, in terms, I'm not sure how much control he had over its visual presentation, but there's definitely a unique look about it. There's the aesthetics. When you see these versions of the tripods, these are Jeff Wayne's tripods. But yeah, apparently it went all the way back in the 70s, where he wanted to create a musical film adaptation of War of the Worlds, and also as well as a stage musical, but at some point or another, he just kind of condensed his vision down to one singular, what do you call, like a rock opera album, a rock opera concept album featuring...
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I would call it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Featuring...
I think that's the best way to classify it.
Right. Featuring, according to the list of credits here, they had like Richard Burton, who was a famous actor from the golden age of Hollywood, as the narrator / the journalist. You had Justin Hayward from the band Moody Blues as the sung thoughts of the journalist, which is a very interesting creative choice there to have two people represent the main character. David Essex as spoken words and the vocals of the Artilleryman. You had Chris Thompson as the voice of humanity. Phil Lynott as the spoken words and vocals of Parson Nathaniel, who is based off of the curate from the book. In other words, the not priest. And several other individuals. You had Julie Covington as the spoken words and vocals of Beth, the parson's wife, and finally Jerry Wayne as the voice of NASA Control. So it was a very small cast of performers, but it's a musical that's mostly based around an orchestra that combines various levels of rock, what do you call it, like orchestral, classical orchestral music, and a lot of techno, like 70s techno.
Yeah, that's an important thing to mention, I think. It's not a musical in the way of like Cats or something like that. It's more like God, I don't even really know what to compare it to.
A concert. It's more of a concert.
Yeah, it's a concert experience. It's it's like it's just the narrator reciting the story of War of the Worlds to you with, I'm assuming passages ripped straight from the book, or maybe not, and sort of a visual element played in the background, and a few songs. But beyond that, it's mostly, an orchestra doing their thing while the narrator does his thing. Right.
And
it's sort of like... an audiobook with like a visual element.
Kind of like that, yeah. In which case, I can definitely see why they eventually made an audible version of the musical, which I still need to listen to. For me, I've listened to the album, the 2006 show, which is what we'll mostly be talking about, and the 2012 New Generation version of the stage show. And of all the songs in the album itself, there are definitely three that stand out as ones that I can call like a traditional musical in terms of them having like significant amounts of vocal performances, that being the Thunder Child, Forever Autumn, and The Spirit of Man, each one focusing on the voice of humanity, the narrator's sung thoughts, and the parson and his wife. Those are the three that I would consider to be like the closest to traditional music, if that makes any sense. So, like the kind of stuff that you could potentially hear on the radio at the time, which I believe some tracks were made for the radio, were put on the radio at some point in time.
Imagine turning on the radio and this is what you hear. You'd be like, "What the fuck is happening?"
Dun 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 dun.
Is it? What
was it? All over again.
Yeah.
So this project of Jeff Wayne's went through a very interesting history, as it ended up initially as a concept album in 1978, I want to say. Yeah, 78 in the UK. And so he kept trying to get it adapted over and over again into a movie over the next like 30 years. From like 1978 to 2006, he tried getting it to be adapted into a movie, into a musical, into a theme park. In the 90s, he had this grand idea for a stage musical with life-size Martian machines, military vehicles, buildings, a battleship, and fucking Sean Connery as a narrator. I showed you that concept art, and we were like, there's there's no fucking way you can make this happen in the 90s.
No. And now it would be a fucking problem. I still don't know if you could do it.
Right. I mean, did you like? I guess like Spider-Man: Turn Off the Dark. It was like the most complex stage show for its time, and even then, it was.
And we all know how that turned out.
Right. It was riddled with problems.
I mean, well, I guess more recently there was the Kong musical, which
right.
Or I don't know if it was a musical or if it was just a stage show, but I'm not sure how successful that was. I haven't seen any clips from it.
And I guess apparently there was also plans. I guess somehow he must have made plans in 2005 with Paramount that he still, because there's this really weird legal loophole, legal complication stuff where it's like he has ownership of the War of the Worlds branding in the UK. He has like the international rights to War of the Worlds in a similar vein to like the complexity surrounding Miriam C. Cooper's King Kong novel, where like Universal has rights, but it's also like it's like partly copyrighted, but also partly public domain. And for the longest time, I guess it wasn't public domain outside the US, the War of the Worlds novel itself, and so they reached an agreement with Paramount when they were eventually doing their 2005 adaptation, to where they said, okay, we'll give you the CGI animated movie rights to War of the Worlds if you let us sell our Spielberg movie internationally, in which case he was like, sure, go ahead, which ironically enough, in the 80s, I believe, he tried getting Steven Spielberg to do a War of the Worlds movie based off of his music album.
I was going to say, he tried to get Steven Spielberg to do his War of the Worlds movie.
Yes. Like I said, this guy he's like, I want my War of the Worlds to be the only one, the definitive War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
Which apparently has not made him, while I do definitely commend him on his inability, on his like dedication to making this thing happen. And as a fan of the album, I do gotta say, yeah, it's a pretty shitty thing to do, to deny everyone their chance of making their War of the Worlds, when again, it's a book from the 1800s. I'm pretty sure, like, it's free reign, it's free ball for everyone.
It should be.
Yeah. So let's see, what was it? So yeah, he tried making a CGI movie in the early 2000s, which apparently didn't really work out. So then he eventually pulled together his resources to put together an actual stage show in 2006, and that has been like the biggest thing so far. The other things that he's managed to put together are like various re-releases and remixes, laser light show, fireworks show, arena tours, DVDs, recordings of the shows. It's just essentially putting out variations of either the album or the stage show. The only other thing that comes to mind are the various real-time strategy games, video games that he has helped put out in the 80s and 90s on PC, I believe. He attempted to do a trilogy of video games for like the modern day consoles. I believe this was back in like the Xbox 360, PS3 days. But that didn't happen, of course. And also there was apparently a Dark Horse comic book adaptation, but then once the book once War of the Worlds finally became public domain all around the world, then Dark Horse was like, yeah, let's just make this our version of War of the Worlds since we don't have to deal with this shit anymore.
And fuck Jeff Wayne.
He sucks and I don't like him.
Nice, you want to do my version of War of the Worlds with the songs and the disco tunes?
That's like the most interesting thing about this one. It's like, it's very indicative of the time it was made in, and I feel like that's what gives it a lot of its charm in the modern day. Not only being like not only having the appeal or like the novelty of it being a musical take on War of the Worlds, but just having it be a disco rock opera take on War of the Worlds. I remember like your reaction, like we were talking.
It is certainly unique.
Yes, and like we were talking during like the violin parts, you know, like dun dun dun, and then as soon as like the disco beat comes in, doop 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 doop, and then like you were just like silent. You were like, what? You were caught off guard by that.
I guess I should have expected it. You did tell me that it was, the album was released in the 70s.
Yeah.
I wasn't prepared for just how funky it got.
I was like, dude, check it out. It's got a fresh beat. It's got a funky, fresh beat. Yeah, and so this... I just really love this like unique style of it. It's kind of like the closest thing I can compare it to is Mecco. If you ever heard that band, or I'm not sure if it's a band or an artist, but Mecco put out several disco rock tracks.
You're talking about the guy who did the Star Wars theme.
Yes,
the disco version. That's a guy. That's not a band. That's a guy.
It's a guy. Okay, thank you. So yeah, he did a lot of sci-fi themes in the 70s and 80s, but yeah, he's mostly well known for his Star Wars track.
Because that shit fucking slaps.
Yes, it does. Absolutely. So this is like...
You put that shit on today, and, I won't dance. Somebody might. Yeah, that shit's great. I love that.
Me too. I can listen to that all day. And so, like, that's pretty much like the closest I can compare this to. I'm
very disco friendly though. A lot of people would be less would be less into it.
That is true, yeah. And this is coming from someone who grew up listening to a lot of Bee Gees during like my childhood. So I was all for this type of music. I guess like another comparison I could make would be something akin to like Queen's soundtrack to the Flash Gordon movie. In terms of its use of electronics, synthesizers, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, that's an interesting comparison.
Yeah, so in terms of the stage show itself, it's very minimalistic. Like we said, it's mostly based on the orchestra, the band itself playing. Well, I forgot what they call themselves, but they gave themselves like a name that's like in reference to the book itself. And now I'm hating myself for not knowing this. It is, for the most part, just mostly you're looking at the band play the music. And for the 2006 version, it's mostly well known for reusing... It got like a lot of this like singers from the original... It's got like quite like a few prominent singers from the original album, but the most interesting creative choice was that because Richard Burton, the narrator, had passed away at this point, they reused his audio from the album and made like this digital recreation of his face that they then project onto a large bust that is like connected, that's like hanging from the ceiling. So like he's like this literal floating Zordon or head, or Jor-El head, as Dylan likes to refer to it as.
Because it is, okay? Listen, that guy, what's his name?
Richard Burton.
I cannot remember that to save my fucking life. Richard Burton, he looks a little bit like Marlon Brando. He's got that sort of same kind of, British accent going on. Mm-hmm. And he's literally a floating head in front of a field of stars. What else am I supposed to think of? All right, it's fucking Jor-El. He recites the story of the War of the Worlds, and then he returns to Krypton, and that's just my headcanon now, and I can't do anything about that.
And occasionally he's replaced by another dude entirely on stage.
And occasionally he's replaced by a guy who looks nothing like him, looks a bit like Kenneth Branagh in those Harry Potter pictures.
Right. The motion pictures.
Motion pictures.
So so it's really funny to not funny, but it's interesting, odd, and a little off-putting, but also somewhat strangely fascinating to see.
It's incredibly creepy.
Yes, it is. To hear, and like the thing is, his performance, it's very dry, very stoic, very like matter of fact, and like he's
like just like Marlon Brando in Superman the movie.
No one would have predicted in the last days of the 20th and 19th century. Like very, very, very dry performance, which in my opinion works for the how would you say, for the material at hand. And it's also kind of bizarre.
They good Kal-El, they wish to be.
You must fight them, the Martians, Kal-El, and eventually they will join you in the sun. Now I'm getting
literally, there'll be a guy on your team called Martian Manhunter, and he's
be wary.
Have his own...
Be wary of that skeezy guy. I don't trust him.
He's got his own thing going on.
And so the most interesting parts is like how they're able to work around the fact that you have a guy who's been dead since 1984, reusing his audio from the album, and then having the actors on stage pretend to interact with him. So
the easiest way to work around it would have been to recast him.
Right.
There are any number of old British dudes who would be great in that role. You could do Sir Patrick Stewart. You could do Ian McKellen.
No one would have believed that in the last days of mankind. Oh God, yeah, I would love to hear Patrick Stewart's War of the Worlds.
A threat would come from space, the final frontier. And
Sean Connery. That's right. Yeah, Sean Connery was originally set to do the voice for the 90s.
Fucking, Christopher Lee was still around. There's a ton of old British dudes with great voices.
Mm-hmm.
The Attenboroughs. Anybody.
Yeah. I could assume that for Jeff Wayne, for Jeff Wayne, he wanted to have like the most. In my opinion, like again, this is just pure speculation. He wanted to have like the most pure, straight adaptation, the most purest version imaginable, with as many people as possible from the album to perform in this adaptation, in this like musical stage adaptation of his album. So I suppose that was his thinking going into it.
Right. Yeah.
And so
I'm just saying it was a very expensive way to go. They had to build that giant head and then project the face onto it, and it's really creepy because like no matter where you look at it from the audience, it looks like it's staring at you.
Right. He's just staring dead straight at you.
It's one of those optical illusions, and then sometimes they'll get like a camera angle of it from like the side, and it's like you're looking at the side of his face, and it's very disconcerting.
What do you think? Like, so we were watching like a DVD version of recorded version of the War of the Worlds stage show from 2006. So occasionally, they'll change angles. They do this thing a lot. I've noticed where whenever there's a lot of animation going on on the screen behind the band, and so during those times the the quote-unquote recorded movie version would switch between actually showing you the animation that would have been playing on screen at that time, or they would show you just the screen and the stage and everything else. So during the times when they show you the narrator on screen, you just see his face like surrounded by stars, like 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Right, and that's a pretty common practice when they release like a home video version of a stage show to like, put in special effects and stuff to make it look prettier for the DVD. Like I don't know if you recall, but when we watched I can't believe I'm about to admit to this. When we watched the
Cats 98,
the home video release of Cats 98.
What a magical year that was.
Ooh-wee. Could have been worse. We could have been watching Cats 2020, or 2019. Was it 2019 or 2020? I don't even know anymore.
2019, because that was before the end of the world.
That's right. There was no pandemic. It wouldn't have been released had it been. Yeah. Okay. I would have rather have had a pandemic that year, but instead we got Cats 2019.
Anyway, yeah, what were you saying while we were watching Cats?
Yeah, but they did some of that in that too, like adding like special effects and stuff to the footage of the stage show to like, I don't know, because it's on DVD. They have to spice it up a little bit,
Or VHS back in those days.
Or yes, VHS. The first time I saw it was on VHS way back in the day, but yeah, whatever home video release platform is current at that time.
Right. And the last thing to mention that there are like two major changes to the stage. That being the massive, the massive model of the famous tripod that comes in. Yeah. It comes in like a third of the way into the musical when the Martian tripods are properly introduced into the story, and is pretty much stagnant. It occasionally shoots some lasers. Its eyes are blinking whenever and it kind of essentially just stays there for the duration of the play. It doesn't move at all, except that in one occasion where, near the end of the story, where, spoiler alert, the Martians lose.
What?
They caught a bit of the 1800s version of COVID back in the day and died. So at that point you start.
How dare you spoil the science fiction novel from 1989 or 1890. 1889. Too soon, man. Too soon.
By the way, spoiler alert, the Titanic sunk. I hope you haven't been reading the Bible lately, because, by the way, Jesus dies.
What?
And don't worry, he comes back later.
Oh, yeah. It's like they say, nobody stays dead except Uncle Ben. Used to be nobody stays dead except Uncle Ben, Jason, Todd, and Bucky, but then 2 out of those 3 came back.
And don't forget, what's her face, Gwen Stacy.
Right, Gwen Stacy. Has she come back? I don't even know anymore.
Her clone, I forgot if her clones ever made it back after the original Clone Saga, but who cares?
Oh yeah, right, there were clones of her, and fuck.
And now there's Spider-Gwen. And then
they did that awful story where they retconned and they revealed that she slept with Norman. I almost said Norman Bates. Norman Osborn.
Anyway, so when the Martians are dying, the model starts, not the model, but the large prop starts to wobble a bit. There's smoke coming out of it. The eyes are blinking. For the most part, it's just standing. It's just very stagnant or very static throughout the whole show. But it is a very impressive tripod to show off. And
yeah, it's not the most convincing effect. Shocking, I know, but it's it works. It works for this production, the stage production.
And what it lacks in performance, it makes up for just in its sheer size alone.
Oh yeah, it's impressive. It's a big hunk of styrofoam.
And the last thing would be this large bridge for the artilleryman. The artilleryman being the character that the narrator meets early on in the book to foreshadow the coming of the tripods, and then later on, through pure blind luck, the narrator meets the artilleryman near the end of the book, and at which point the artilleryman gives him these grand, overly ambitious plans of building a society from the ground up, underground. And so for his musical...
All over again, Andres?
All over again! I will say, I do love that line where he makes a reference to the famous novel Brave New World. It's a brave new world with just a handful of men. We'll start all over again!
Yeah, I was not a fan of this song. I felt that it went on way too long. I have that problem with a lot of the songs in this, though. I think they drag a little bit. This one, the Nathaniel one, also.
Yeah. Damn it, Nathaniel.
Damn it, Nathaniel. I don't know how many people are going to understand that reference. But the entire time we were watching that scene, I'm just like, oh, damn it, Nathaniel.
Oh no, Nathaniel.
Nathaniel.
Yeah.
I in your car, Nathaniel.
I'm gonna tie your shit, Nathaniel. God damn it, not everything's a goddamn demon, Nathaniel.
Oh boy. But some of these, because there's not a lot of variation in the lyrics either. They tend to pick a few lines and repeat them a lot.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, I felt that a couple of the songs could have been trimmed by, a few minutes.
And try telling that to Jeff Wayne. He's like, no, instead we're going to be adding new songs from here on out.
We're adding a prologue where a guy talks to a chick and he tells her she's dumb. And
because she woman. No.
Just like a woman.
That was that we'll get into. That's from the we're referencing the 2012 edition, the new generation edition of the stage play, which we'll get into in a bit. But
that's a whole other can of interesting.
Yeah, a whole other space Martian canister.
Yeah.
But back to the artilleryman. The one prop they have is they have this like random bridge, arc-shaped bridge that comes down for him to climb up and sing. And I'm not really sure what exactly the bridge is supposed to represent. I guess it's supposed to be like a structure from his imaginary vision, his imagined vision of an underground, wonderful, subterranean city. I don't know. But
right.
Those were the only real times where there was any like major props involved, because like I mentioned, there are very few visual components or like physical practical components to the concert stage show. Most of the action that takes place is on the big screen behind them, in which case it's a lot of CGI stuff, which according to my friend, it's all kind of like reused assets from the canceled CGI animated movie. And I feel like it does a good enough job at portraying the events that are meant to take place during these musicals. But the CGI is quite spotty at points. And I remember the first impression it leaves, it's not a good one when you see the little Martian taxi awkwardly walking to the Martian base on Mars.
It reminds me a lot of when you go to like a really touristy area and they have those like 4D like theater attractions where you like sit in that thing.
It's more of like a theme park level of CGI.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Mm-hmm. And the interesting part was that you do see Richard Burton's narrator character, but he's always shot from the back, and he's conveniently always wearing his hat, so you never see his face. But we're supposed to assume that that's him because he's wearing the same sort of like white suit that the singing version of the narrator wears when he's on stage, I suppose.
Right.
And so that is pretty much what the stage show is for the most part. It's just, mostly a lot of it is just CGI. And another thing that you pointed out during our viewing of the 2006 show was that whenever there are people who are what's the word? Not green, composited. When they're like people are green screened on or composited, where like they're in the foreground and all like the Martian action stuff is happening in the background. The compositing isn't really all that convincing.
It reminds me a bit of some of the worse effects in something like Gorgo or that one scene in Return of the Jedi where you can see the outline around Luke Skywalker,
Right. I suppose it's not that bad if you're like in that massive stadium, if you're like in the audience and you're watching it from, to quote the Birdemic director, from a distance, it looks almost convincing. It looks kind of convincing.
But when you're watching it, to quote a different director, on your fucking phone, it's different.
That is very true, my friend. And I guess like going into like the 2012 version, they do have another static tripod. There is pretty much like the same. The cast is pretty much this, not the same. They're all different actors, but they did bring in they had like a prologue sequence where you see like, what was it? A scientist and his wife looking at Mars and noticing some puffs of some green smoke coming out. That really doesn't add much to the story, but the biggest change was how they presented the narrator, who in this version was Liam fucking Neeson.
Yes.
And so if you're ever going to watch the 2012 version, in my opinion, I feel like the performers in the 2012 version are not as good as the 2006.
The singers.
The singers, yes. Sorry, yeah. The singers are not as good as in the 2012 version as the 2006 version, but Liam Neeson, however, really makes the 2012 version worth checking out, in my opinion, simply because it's Liam fucking Neeson.
Yeah, he does a great job. He does a really great job.
I feel like because he's not, like, I can imagine, like, with Richard Burton's, again, it's very stoic, but at the same time, you can tell his acting is very divorced from the rest of the performers, simply because of the nature of how he recorded his lines solely for that album version, where I can imagine he was in like a recording booth surrounded by absolutely no one. He's probably taking directions from Jeff Wayne and whoever else, and just, speaks into a microphone. Whereas with Liam Neeson, you can tell that he is given like much more context to what he was doing, and he's actually like looking into the camera and giving. Who knows? Maybe he might have had a word or two with some of the performers, just so he knows who he's working with, who he's talking to, who he's going to be portrayed alongside. I feel like with him, he feels like he's far more involved, and less, to quote you when we were watching it, less of a stiff performance.
Yes, yeah. Through no fault of his own, he died prior to the production, and so there's not a whole lot you can do about that.
Right. So he definitely gives like a more emotional performance as the narrator, and like it's very interesting that they'd use the Pepper's ghost effect, where they kind of portrayed this little pseudo hologram on a screen, to give the illusion that he is on stage alongside the rest of the characters, which leads to the funniest moment where he knocks out the Patterson, which I feel like they got it at like the worst angle imaginable, the least convincing angle imaginable for the DVD recording.
Yeah, it was really ambitious how they had Liam Neeson, who is still a projection because it's Liam Neeson. You're not going to get him to be on stage with you.
Yeah, every day, for every performance on tour. Nah, the guy's got like a bunch of movies to make over in Hollywood land. He's
got a film Taken 6 or whatever. Yeah. So he's constantly handing things to people through the screen. It's a lot like in Jurassic Park when Richard Attenborough interacts with Richard Attenborough.
Right. Yeah, it's like, can I have some of your blood? Oh, that's right, I have lines.
Yeah, and so when he throws that WWE punch to knock out the guy, it's pretty awkward looking.
Right, only because like the camera angle, you can clearly see the gap between the Pepper's ghost screen and the Patterson actor. It's like, I may be just a two-dimensional image, but I'll still kick someone's ass in this production. And that was the thing, like, while we were watching the 2012 version, we just kept imagining that this is just like crazy Taken version or crazy Darkman version of Liam Neeson.
Fuck these aliens.
What did they do with my wife? Take the fucking elephant.
Where have they taken her?
Can you believe this shit right here? This fucking Martian's all about. So that was an amazing part of the whole performance. Other than that, the music itself from the 2012 version is pretty much the same, just with a few slightly different sound effects added in. So there's some occasional pseudo dubstep-ish techno sound effects added in, but for the most part, it's essentially the same. You're going in and seeing the same thing, in my opinion. But other than that, having listened back to the original album, which is available on YouTube through I believe it's like a Vivo account or something, you can check out all of the tracks, and yeah, they're pretty. Well, I was surprised by how faithfully they were able to recreate pretty much all of the tracks from the album. Let's see, just going to bring them up right here. So yeah, within this album, there are, I believe, 13 tracks. A lot of them can range from like as short as 5 minutes long to about 12 or 13 minutes long. You start off with The Eve of the War, which gives you the main thematic tune that you'll hear a lot throughout this production, the dun 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 dun. After that, there's the Horcell Common and the Heat Ray, which introduced a lot of the the bass tune, a lot of the techno, like what do you call it, the synthetic vocal tracks, and a lot of like the techno effects that they use to represent the actions of the Martians, especially when it came to the heat ray, where you get that, which sounds a lot like that one song whose name I always escapes me, where it's like, ah.
Oh, that's you're talking about the Immigrant Song.
Yeah.
See, I sometimes get that mixed up with Barracuda a little bit.
Right.
I have to stop and go, which one is it?
Come to the land and the ice and snow.
Yeah, it's this Immigrant Song, yeah.
After that, there's the exchange with the artilleryman and the fighting machine. After that, there's the Justin Hayward solo, where he's, as the narrator, describes his longing for his wife with the song Forever Autumn. After that, there's one of my favorites, Thunderchild, which this is the interesting part about Jeff Wayne's adaptation of War of the Worlds. It's that he sheds light on several key moments from the book that I never quite appreciated until I saw this version. And the Thunderchild was the one that really kind of opened my eyes, because it exists in one single chapter where there's a portion, in fact, like one of the biggest changes that Jeff Wayne made for his adaptation was the removal of the narrator's brother. For like roughly 2 or 3 chapters, the perspective switches from the narrator over to his brother, so that way you can see what's going on in London, so you can see, like, get a different perspective on the Martian invasion. And the last chapter the brother was featured in, he is escaping on a steamboat that is being attacked by tripods. And so the fictional battleship, the Thunderchild, comes in and essentially sacrifices itself for the sake of the steamboat's escape. And so during that book, you have everybody on the steamboat just cheering on, praying to God that the Thunderchild may somehow make it out of this. And I feel a lot of that energy, a lot of that emotion is carried into the song Thunderchild. And the what was it? The singer that they got for this song, Chris Thompson, I felt did a wonderful job giving that energy and that gusto into that song. Come on, Thunderchild.
And can we talk about the fucking guy in the 2012 version? The fucking hair metal guy? He's
yes. Farewell, farewell, Thunderchild. Fucking coming in looking like fucking Dio or something.
Yeah.
Standing firm.
He comes in dressed in 1800s apparel like everybody else, but he's got this 1980s mane, like the full like white snake, like.
Yes. I was like, hold on, is that the guy they're getting for this song? Oh, we gotta listen to this.
Yeah, we saw the writing on the wall. We knew what direction that was going.
Right. Let's see. And after that was the Red Weed, which was a song dedicated to another portion that seems to be skipped over in a lot of adaptations, where the Martians have this like indigenous plant-like substance that grows through wherever they happen to travel around. And it's like a very nice, soothing musical piece. Kind of gives it a very ethereal quality. After that, there's The Spirit of Man, where you have another big change, where the curate from the book is changed into a parson, who is given a wife in this version, as he and his wife are constantly arguing, one being more hopeful for humanity's future, the other one's in complete despair and has given up on any sort of hope. And so it's this constant back and forth between them until it eventually leads to the death of his wife and the entrapment of him and the narrator.
Right.
Let's see. After that part would be the Artilleryman, which we went into that already. This is another part where I didn't really get so much from listening and reading the book, where I remember the part where the narrator meets the artilleryman again, but I forgot his reasoning for abandoning him soon afterwards. And I find it very humorous in this version, where it's like, yeah, we're going to create a brand new civilization. I even started building a tunnel underground. I spent an entire week on, and the narrator in both versions, he's like, he only dug about like 10 yards. I could have done that in a fucking day.
Yeah, which when Liam Neeson says it is especially funny, because he's like, it's got that little bit of like, I could have built this in a fucking day, like that, like that attitude.
This fucking idiot. He's a lazy piece of shit, he is.
Maybe that was just us reading into it, but I don't know. I feel like with him saying it, it feels like even more of a burn than when Jarrell is like, I could have done that much in a day, Khalil.
What? Now you expect him to like fucking like shake the shit out of that killer, man? What the fuck are you doing, man? You're just drinking and playing card games.
Back on Krypton, I could have dug that much in 5 hours.
with my robot buddy Brainiac.
Yeah, that's a friendship that'll last.
Let's see. After that, we have the kind of like the finale, the two finale pieces. We have Dead London, which is one showcasing the destruction of London and the death of the Martians. Which leads me to say like what I thought was one of the most ingenious pieces of adapting the movie or the book into the musical was in the book the Martians have this battle cry, or at least the tripods have this battle cry where they say "Ooh la," and turning that into a thematic vocal piece anytime the Martians are on the attack, I thought was absolutely brilliant. And so for the Dead London piece, you hear this dying war cry of "Ooh la." And so I thought that was just like a very effective piece to use throughout the musical. And eventually we have the upbeat epilogue, followed by the very foreboding epilogue piece, where it takes place in supposedly the modern day, where you have NASA sending drones to Mars, seemingly unaware that seemingly forgotten that fucking invaders came from that very planet. And
yeah, that's where I'm like, bullshit. Like, I don't care if that was in the 1800s. Like, people would have remembered that shit.
Right.
The one planet that we know for sure there are aliens in this universe, and they're like going around like, what? Aliens?
What's going on here? Why are our drones suddenly disappearing one by one?
What's the deal with Mars? Like, it feels like if this musical had been set in the modern day instead of being set in the time of the book, that this would have been the opening scene. But having it as an epilogue makes much less sense, I think.
I mean, it is a very interesting idea, and I think it's something that has been toyed around in other adaptations, where what if the Martians did come back after learning how to overcome Earth's bacteria? And I do like Richard Burton's final lines in the album, where it's like, what if they were to come back one day? Would we still be safe? Would Earth eventually... What if this is just a temporary time of peace? What if Earth truly does belong to the Martians? And those were essentially his last words before transitioning into the NASA epilogue. I
feel like they've got more problems than just the germs, though, right? Because, like, in the play... Like, at one point, they managed to take down one of the tripods.
Yes.
With, like, cannons. With, like, Napoleonic cannons. And I'm like, they gotta step up their weapons technology if they're gonna invade in the modern day. We got fucking jets and tanks and A-bombs. Like,
right.
And H-bombs and F-bombs. Like, we got a bomb for every letter.
Unless this is going to end up like the 1953 version of War of the Worlds, where they do attempt to use a nuclear bomb and does jack shit on them. Bombs, weapons, missiles, they're like toys to them.
Right, well, those Martians had force fields. These Martians, apparently, no force fields.
Very true, yeah. So it is a very interesting concept to see, like, what if the Martians invaded today, what would we be able to do? Although it also brings up the fact that if we are able to significantly increase or update our technology over the course of 100 years, what are the Martians capable of? And
honestly, the humans in this universe are stupid for not attacking Mars first. They could have nuked Mars from orbit.
Oh, dude. Are you familiar?
It's the only way to be sure.
Are you familiar with the Tim Burton movie Mars Attacks?
Yes.
Do you know the trading cards, the story of the trading cards the movie was based on?
No.
Okay, so each card, I think it was like a collection of like 52 collectible trading cards for Mars Attacks, tells a singular story, and at the end of the story, humans fight back against the Martians, go to Mars, nuke the fuck out of it before returning back home.
We do. Yeah, we do. Fuck a Martian, boy. That's how Daddy did it. That's how America does it. And it's worked out pretty well so far.
Yeah. Beyond that, the only other time I can recall someone attempting a pseudo-sequel imagining of a second invasion from the War of the Worlds Martian would be the straight-to-DVD animated movie War of the Worlds Goliath. Now, I haven't seen War of the Worlds Goliath in, like, so many years, but essentially it's a sequel to the classic story of War of the Worlds, where after 1989, during the original attack, humanity recovers.
1889.
Yes, 1889, 98, whatever. They are able to repurpose the tripod technology. They make tripods of their own, which are essentially World War I tanks on legs, on steampunk legs. And it takes place in the early 1900s, like either World War I or World War II era, and you have Earth now preparing themselves against a second wave of Martian invaders, now with more advanced tripods and technology and heat rays and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was going to say, even by that era, we would be able to take down the ones from the original book, because by that point we've got like fighter planes and, huge anti-aircraft guns and shit. Like,
right. One of these days, I'm not sure, I gotta revisit that War of the Worlds Goliath to see if it's worth talking about on Fully Endorsed. But it is something that's very interesting, and so if there are any other adaptations of War of the Worlds that you guys would love to recommend in the comments below, please let us know, or heck, just let us know your favorite adaptation of War of the Worlds. So is there anything else to talk about when it comes to this musical, Dylan?
I'm not sure. How long have we been going?
Let's see, about 50 minutes, I'd say, according to the recording.
50 minutes? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything we've neglected to talk about here.
I guess since I was going down song by song, I was going down the list of songs. Were there any tracks that you remembered? Not if you don't remember the name. Were there any moments, particularly memorable or favorite moments of yours from the either version of the stage show or album?
Favorite moment. That's a good question. Let me think about that for a second. I already mentioned my least favorite scene.
Yes.
Let's see. What would be my favorite moment? I think perhaps that first scene where I alluded to it before, where we see the tripods fighting the military, the 1800s British military with their Napoleon era cannons. Like that's a really cool scene, and I thought that they visualized it in a really effective way.
I absolutely agree. And I think that's one of the things that makes War of the Worlds so, just in general, the original story so interesting, and what gives it an extra level of appeal in the modern day. Whereas back in the day, that was just, it's just, what if aliens attacked modern day Earth? But given that it's been over 100 years since that book was published, now it's kind of like it's become like a novelty, a uniqueness to see Martians attacking late 1800s London.
Right. And you know H.G. Wells' original inspiration behind the book, right?
Colonialism?
Yeah, I forget. There's a specific instance,
Hmm.
but it was basically just taking that whole thing that had been done, over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Think of like the war with the Zulu in Africa, between the English and the Zulu tribe, and
Mm-hmm.
similar things that happened in the Americas.
Mm-hmm.
Can't think of who that could be, and it was just this idea of like, what if aliens showed up to Earth and they were their technology was as advanced to us as we were to them. Like, basically, what if the shoe were on the other foot?
Right.
So,
What if humanity at its peak got knocked down a peg?
right. It was a lot less. It was a lot less like, at the time. The message of the book was a lot less like humans having to band together against aliens. It was more like, hey, England, this is kind of fucked up when you're on the other end of it, huh?
Right.
What do you think of this?
And I think that is a kind of like a very interesting message that can apply to us today. I mean, why else would they set a lot of modern day adaptations of War of the Worlds in the U.S., since now we're the ones who kind of like is showing off a lot of our political power over other countries.
That's how America does it.
Yes. Yeah, so that is definitely what I feel like gives War of the Worlds such a timeless quality, for it to work in practically any medium, whether it's a movie, a radio play, or a concept album, or a stage production. Also, I gotta say, like,
Or an illustrated children's book version of the original novel.
yes, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, great illustrated classics. That was my first introduction to War of the Worlds back in like 2004. So that was I don't think I
ever read the War of the Worlds one, but I read a lot of the others. That was a very influential series on me, I know, and perhaps many other children.
Yeah. That was definitely how like I was first introduced to a lot of classics like War of the Worlds, The Time Machine.
Yes. Frankenstein, the first version.
Frankenstein, yes. God.
The first version of Frankenstein I read was the Illustrated Classics version.
The Invisible Man also. I read that one.
A lot of those.
I think Rip Van Winkle, maybe that one as well, perhaps. I'm not quite sure.
I think I read the Moby Dick one at some point.
Right, I remember the Moby Dick one too. Yeah, I read that one. God, I love that. Once I got
past the title.
Tee.
You can't name a book Moby Dick. I'm not mature enough for that shit.
It was a different time back then, Dylan.
It's a different time. I'm sure Dick didn't mean that. It's like when you look back at those old Batman comics and they're like, boner. You committed a real boner.
No one has seen a boner like mine before.
I'll show them how many boners the Joker can make.
Well, they get a load of mine.
They get a load of me. Where do they get a load of my boner? Of course, I read that now and I'm like, Ralph Boner? Like, it's taken on so many more meanings.
Right. Let's see. Oh, I also forgot to mention that in general, the Martian designs and the tripods themselves are surprisingly very unique inventions that, while the idea of an alien invasion has been copied numerous times since the publishing of War of the Worlds, no one has ever quite attempted to copy the tripods nor the Martians themselves. Nowadays, we have the popular idea of the big-headed gray aliens and their flying saucers. That has become the go-to design for generic alien invader, not so much the tripods nor the Martian squid people.
Yeah, because they don't really have spaceships. They just sort of shoot themselves at Earth with a giant space cannon.
Yes.
And,
it's that old school, like 18th century what would eventually lead to the birth of steampunk idea of space travel. If you ever watch Journey to the Moon or A Trip to the Moon? Yeah, you know, just just take a giant gun and just shoot a motherfucker into space.
Shoot him at the moon.
Yes. So, even by today's standards, the those sci-fi qualities of War of the Worlds I still feel like are incredibly unique and imaginative. And in terms of this version's design... Oh yeah, I forgot to ask, I guess because they're like the main set piece, what is your take on the designs of the Martians and the tripods in this series? I mean, or rather, in this musical.
Well, in the 2006 and 2012 versions, we don't really get a great look at the Martians.
Right.
You do get a little bit of a better look at them in the 2016 production, which we have not been talking about, and they do not look great. Mm-hmm. But from what we see in the 2006 and 2012 versions, I'm down with that. It's very true to the book. The idea of these Martians is just basically big brains with tentacles that are driving these machines.
No visible eyes, though. Their eyes are like whatever eyes they may have. They're just like sunken inside these very menacing skull-like eye holes. Right.
They don't even have the fucking red, green, and blue or whatever from the 50s. So it's very true to the book in that way, and that's great. The tripods are a bit weird. Mm-hmm. They're very insectoid in this version, mm-hmm. and I would, and that feels a bit cliche to me. I think I would prefer a tripod design that's a bit more alien and doesn't necessarily ape anything that exists on Earth.
Right. For me, it took a while for the tripods to grow on me, simply because I don't like it when tripods in like the War of the Worlds tripods are depicted as very insectoid. As you said, their legs are on the side of the body rather than placed directly underneath the body, which was
and they've got the weird windshield with the bug eyes.
Yes, that you mentioned looks like a giant butt.
It does. It looks like they have giant green asses, but it's literally just like if you've seen the 50s version of The Fly, mm-hmm. like the eyes off from that. It's basically just that.
Right. And apparently there's like this extended lore. Oh, we did get the what do you call it? So technically the tripods, what we refer to as the tripods, the book refers to as the fighting machines. And alongside the fighting machine,
a great name for like a punk band or something.
Yeah. Alongside the fighting machines, there are the crawling machine, the handling machines. The handling machines are the small, tiny machines that the Martians pilot to build the fighting machines and other machinery. But in this musical, they kind of upgraded the handling machine into its own thing that's in charge of collecting all the human bodies, which is what the fighting machines did in the original book.
Right. Yeah, so there's an attempt to diversify the Martian technology a bit more, I think.
Mm-hmm. Strangely enough, there's no flying machine, which is something I often forget about because the flying machines barely appear in the actual book. So no flying machines in this version. But also apparently, like if you ever played the real-time strategy video games, they introduced like way more fighting variations of the tripods and handling machines, flying machines, taxi machines, transportation machines, what have you. And it gets to a point where there's like these massive, large spider-like machines that I believe are considered not canon, only canon to the video games.
Right. H.G. Wells to imagine flying machines was pretty ahead of his time because we didn't even have airplanes at that point. So it's good on him. Although the flying machine had sort of been something that a lot of people had dreamt about for many, many years. Leonardo da Vinci had blueprints for them that obviously he never built.
Yeah, that's very true. And the fact is, like, even to this day, we barely established walking machines. At this point in time, we've had like small robots that can walk on two legs. What is it called? Boston Dynamics has a series of robots that can walk on 4 legs, 2 legs, what have you. But never to the scale. Like even the supposed walking Gundam can't actually walk without having a giant support system connected to its back.
Yeah, they're a long way from going upstairs.
Yeah, right.
Some of those Boston Dynamic robots, they pull off some crazy shit. You remember that one?
Yeah.
Like backflips and stuff. And then
right.
There's those robot dogs that go around.
Yes. I was like, oh shit, Skynet is upon us now.
Become self-aware.
Dun, 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 dun. Wait, dude. Okay, what do you think of this? A Terminator musical.
The musical?
Terminator the musical.
Oh my god, I'm down for Terminator the musical.
Yes.
That would be great.
Get on it, Jeff Wayne.
Like you do the plots of Terminator 1 and 2. You do it as one big show.
Yeah. Just split into 2 acts like this one, like this play.
Yes. Oh my god, yes. Terminator the musical. and then in the middle of the show, in case anybody in the audience hasn't seen the films, which what the fuck are you doing there? When whoever plays the T-800 suddenly becomes a good guy, it would be even more shocking.
Yeah. Just imagine like someone doing a Schwarzenegger voice while singing.
I just want young John Connor to just have a whole song where he's like, "She's not my mom, Todd," and
oh man. Oh, okay. So I guess the last question for you, since given that Jeff Wayne originally wanted to turn this into a movie, do you think this musical could potentially work as a movie, animated or live action or otherwise?
I don't know, because I don't think it's as good as like Little Shop of Horrors.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to take what he has and expand on it a lot. You would have to add more songs, because what he has, there are basically 4 or 5 like real songs, and the rest is like orchestral stuff.
Yeah.
So to fill out a movie musical, you would need more than that. Mm-hmm. So they would have to expand on it. I feel like that they would have to modernize it a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a much harder thing to adapt.
Right.
But could it be done? I mean, sure. Why not?
Mm-hmm. I know there's someone... Oops, sorry. If you heard that clip... Actually, I'll cut out that clip later. There actually is, there was someone who did, an animatic, creating their own sort of, animation sequence that syncs up with the musical. And I wish I could have shown... I should have shown you this before playing this... before recording this podcast. But I feel like that definitely shows potential for an animated project, for not animated, but for a film project, even if it's not a feature-length film, maybe a 40-minute film, what have you. I think what would be cool, it would be cool to have something akin to Pink Floyd's The Wall, or even Interstellar 5555, to where to have a musical film that potentially incorporates elements of talking and exposition and character moments, and also kind of essentially do it like a Disney movie. Imagine having a Disney take on this sort of thing.
That would be a lot easier to pull off. If you're trying to do live action, you would have to you'd have to reformat the whole story too, because in a film it's all show don't tell, and in this it's all tell because we can't show. So 90% of that narration is gone immediately.
Right.
Cast Liam Neeson. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of that would have to be changed. Also, in a movie musical, the music, there are breaks in between the songs. Mm-hmm. Whereas the music just goes. It's just wall to wall. Again, it's not really a traditional musical as much as it is a concert with a story. So a lot of that would have to be adjusted or changed.
Yeah.
So
very, very true there. If there ever is a cinematic version of Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds by
the official name of the movie
by H.G. Wells,
right.
I look forward to it, and I honestly hope that one of these days I may potentially see this tour in person. What about you? Would you like to see this in person one of these days? Or
perhaps I would go in person. Yes, I don't think I would ever sit down and watch it again, on my own. But if it was in person, I might go. That might be fun.
Okay, yeah. It would be interesting to at least check out, because they have attempted to update the technology behind this when you look at the 2006 version to the 2012 version to the 2016 version. They do make some attempts to update the show on a technical level. And so whether or not it's successful, that, is definitely up for debate, especially in the case of the 2016 version. But I would be very curious to see how they're able to portray this version of the story, this take on the story, as time goes on.
Yeah, you know what? Here's a crazy idea. Since you're doing this stuff with Liam Neeson where you're projecting him onto the stage or whatever, get an actor for the narration role who can also sing, and then just have him do his own songs and then project those onto the stage. Like, wouldn't that be easier? But whatever.
Yeah, I guess. But then again, you don't have the star power of a Richard Burton or a Liam Neeson. Or you know what, dude? Imagine getting fucking someone I'm blanking, Hugh Jackman, who can act and sing.
That would work too. Yeah, get a Hugh Jackman. I'd go for a Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, maybe not someone that big, because obviously he's not going to be able to be physically on stage.
Right.
But it could be possible. I forgot to mention, not a fan of the narrator singer of the narration singer from the 2012 version.
Yeah, he was struggling. He was struggling to hit those notes, and then so was the guy, the new soldier guy. He was really struggling in that song.
All over it again. It's like he lost his voice there.
Yeah, that was no bueno.
Yeah, we were like, oh no, no. For me, I was like, just no. Yeah.
I was like, this is very. I told this to you. This is very reminiscent to when somebody's doing karaoke and they try to sing "Take on Me" by Aha, and they get to the day or two. Yeah, nobody can hit that note.
No,
except for the guy who did. I don't even know how he did it.
The Weezer guy.
My headcanon is that when they recorded that song, one of his bandmates just had to kick him in the nuts. right at that note. Just
in a day or two. Right.
Because I maybe could have hit that note when I was 5. No adult man can hit that note.
Right. The only one who could do that is Michael Jackson. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us.
Right.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned before, not a fan of the new singers, especially for the artilleryman and the narrator singer. But Liam Neeson, if you're gonna watch it, go for that. So, I guess now would be a perfect time to go with our final thoughts on Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds.
I just can't wait for Jeff Wayne's The War of the Worlds, the flamethrower.
The kids will love it. They technically do got a flamethrower on that
they
tripod.
Do. There is a flamethrower in the was it
2012 version, yeah.
Yeah, because I was like, that's not a heat ray.
It shoots heat.
And you were trying to debate me on this. Heat, sure. Ray, no.
It produces light, kind of. It's a ray of light.
So is a light bulb. If they just held the light bulb up there, you go, oh, that's pretty weak.
Which is kind of what they did for the 2006 version.
In the 2016 version, we didn't watch the whole thing, but we watched some clips, and they actually had some pretty impressive effects. Where there was a beam of light that came out of the thing, and then they had some pyrotechnics on the stage that would go off. Very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish.
And that was the version of the tripod that also actually moved.
Right.
Not very well, mind you, but it moved.
Yes, they're trying. God damn it. Not sure why it's walking sideways.
Because there's no room on the stage. They can't have it walk forward or it'll tip over into the audience.
Yeah.
So it's like the chandelier in Phantom of the Opera. So they have to fucking just have it crab walk from side to side.
Help, friends, I'm tipping over. Sorry. Final thoughts.
Yes. Final thoughts. If you're a huge fan of the War of the Worlds, like we are, Definitely check this out. This is a very interesting adaptation. It I don't know if we talked enough about this, but it adapts some aspects of the book that most other versions don't.
Mm-hmm.
Such as the Red Weed, such as the Thunder Child. So in a weird way, it's perhaps one of the most faithful adaptations that there are. But also, it's an interesting curiosity. It's something that you should probably watch just to go, huh, like that. I don't know if I would ever watch it again per se, because I feel like it's one of those things that once you've seen it, you've seen it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm definitely glad that I watched it, and so yeah, I would definitely endorse this product.
Yeah, and so will I. Like you, I really feel like it's a very unique take on War of the Worlds. I'm really a big fan into this like rock, disco, funk, operatic, orchestral music. I've actually been listening to the soundtrack on its own for like the last 2 weeks, just because it's like really almost like addicting to listen to for me personally. Heck, I love to actually own the album one of these days on like CD or something. So in terms of like what version to go for, I'd say perhaps the 2006 version would be my go-to pick. And if you're gonna watch see it in person, might as well see like the most visually interesting version with the original some of the original performers from the album, and then you can watch the album or listen to the album on its own, which is available on YouTube. And then finally you can check out the 2012 version if you're interested.
Yes. So, despite having some interesting effects work, the 2016 version is widely considered to be the weakest version.
Right, and that's why there's no DVD release of that version available.
Right. But yeah, definitely check out the 2012 one too, especially if you're a big Liam Neeson fan.
Yes. Right. So yeah, there goes our review. Farewell, fully endorsed. Okay, I'll stop. So what are we going to talk about next time, Dylan?
Okay, listen, everybody. I know we just did WandaVision not that long ago, but damn it, Marvel.
Damn it, Nathaniel.
Damn it, Nathaniel. Damn it, Kevin Feige. Marvel's on a fucking roll, and we got to talk about it. We got to talk about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and then I promise we'll take a break from Marvel. We won't talk about any more Marvel until Loki comes out. And but yeah, so next time on episode 32, we will talk about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We're going to show Andres that for the first time and see how he feels about all that. It might get slightly political. Oh, Jesus.
Oh, shit.
Keep your politics out of my politically charged comic book character. But, so yeah, tune in next time for that.
Absolutely. So, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. I have been Andres Perez, aka Kaiju Noir.
And I've been SuperGame64.
And until next time, everybody, take care.